Are you a woman in the corporate world striving to break barriers, challenge unconscious bias, and lead the way for women in leadership roles globally? If so, this is the podcast for you. Introducing Leading Ladies Who Lunch. The lunch hour is usually the time when colleagues get together for real, honest conversations about work, life, and everything in between. In each episode of Leading Ladies Who Lunch, we'll delve into insightful discussions and share actionable strategies to help you navigate corporate life. Co-hosted by me, Cece George, a leadership development architect and inspirational speaker. I'm thrilled to share my experience and expertise on leadership, mentorship, and organizational intelligence to help you own your career.
And me, Rachel Lowndes, CEO and founder, Imposter Syndrome expert, and mindset coach at Rachel Lowndes Coaching and Consulting. Passionate about helping women conquer imposter syndrome and unleash their inner confidence to get the recognition and promotions they deserve.
Jam-packed with insightful conversations, expert advice, and inspiring stories from a diverse group, we'll explore how to overcome obstacles, shatter those glass ceilings, and build unshakable mindsets to unlock your true potential. So whether you're sipping a coffee or enjoying a meal at your desk, tune in for a no-host bar lunchtime chat. Episodes will be dropped every 2 weeks. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button.
Leading Ladies Who Lunch, empowering women, one conversation at a time.
Hello, and welcome back to the Leading Ladies Who Lunch podcast. Hey, Rachel, what's going on?
Hello, Cece. How are you? Looking lovely as usual. I'm really looking forward to today's topic. Exciting.
Oh, I thank you, darling. I try. You, of course, are always looking so lovely. And I'm right there with you. I'm really looking forward to this topic. It's something that I've thought a lot about over the years. So this is going to be really good.
Yeah, same. I've really thought about this one.
So I don't know about you, but every so often I try to clean out my inbox. My email inbox gets flooded with so much stuff and junk. And over the weekend, while I was doing that cleanup, I came across an email from a woman who I worked with. It must be like more than a decade ago. And she is someone I randomly think about her. And when I do, I always have such fond memories. I think this woman is brilliant. Let me just say that. I thought she was super smart. And at the time that I worked with her, we just happened to sit next to each other. We really actually didn't work together by our job descriptions. We just worked in the same company. And when I sat next to her, I started to get to know her slowly. Now, at first glance, she didn't seem to blend in with everyone else. She wasn't concerned with wearing the really big corporate suits, the pantyhose, doing the hair, the makeup, being all made up. She was very real to who she was, and that's what I admired about her. So one day I asked her about how long she's been in that role, and I was surprised when she told me 12 years in the same exact role. I thought, gosh, if I'm in the same role for 12 years, I don't know what I would do. First of all, I would get really bored. But then I also asked her why she didn't pursue another opportunity, like a promotion to a director or a senior director or something like that. And she was really candid and said, I don't want to end up like the rest of them.
Wow, like, hang on a minute, 12 years, holy smokes, right? I actually really admire people who stay for the long run in companies.
Right?
But, like you, I personally I'd just get too bored too. But also I've just recently been told by an ADHD specialist GP that I have ADHD. It doesn't surprise me, to be fair. So that might explain a lot about my own career. But wait, so what you just said at the end there, I don't want to end up like the rest of them. The rest of who? What does she mean by that?
By the leaders that she saw
Oh,
in those roles, the people who were in director positions, senior director, AVPs. She meant she didn't want to end up like them because their example of leadership wasn't great.
got
So
it.
in her mind, to go
Mm,
into a role like that meant you had to become, for lack of a better narrative, an asshole. And she didn't
right.
want to end up like that. And she was She was so humble, but so much fun, so full of energy. And I saw in her her passion. She had her work, she did that, but she loved coming home and she would paint, she would bake, she had her family. Like she would come and tell me all these things. And
Mm,
it was the way that she really lived her life. She did her job, she did great. But then she had this other really great part of her that that people didn't really know about her. And that conversation, it stayed with me and from time to time, I think about her and her decision to do the same kind of work day in and day out.
mm,
And, she told me it was more important to her to have a happy home and a happy home life and to focus on living rather than working.
right.
And I thought, well, I mean, first, she's so bright and talented. Why wouldn't she want to pursue a leadership role? But the answer was very personal to what her overall life goals were. And that's how I started to think about this idea of leadership avoidance. And,
Mm,
we know being in a leadership position, it comes with stress. Okay, that's a given. We get that. But, when you look at your team, your department, I just wonder, including me, how many are avoiding taking on a leadership role? I can think of a couple of people in addition to her that I think have really avoided it.
mm,
And, just some research that I found in a study conducted by Harvard Business Review, there are three main reasons why people avoid leadership. Okay.
right. Yep.
So first you have the impact on their current workplace relationships. So some people are afraid they'll risk their friendship and hurting other people's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I get that.
Mm-hmm.
The second big thing is fear of others judging or thinking bad of them. So,
Right.
being seen as a know-it-all, being seen as maybe aggressive. Okay, I can see that.
Yeah.
And the third one they named was being blamed, a fear that they will be held responsible if the team fails. I
Yeah.
mean, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I mean, when I first heard about this phenomenon, I thought, and that's when I brought it up to you, like, let's talk about leadership avoidance. So I thought, hang on, that sounds like how I've been in my career, avoiding leadership at all costs, right? So for our listeners, leadership avoidance is a phenomenon in which individuals, despite having the potential to lead or the opportunity to take charge, intentionally shy away from leadership roles or responsibilities. So, as we kind of just touched on there, this behavior can be driven by fear, self doubt, or a lack of confidence in their abilities, among other factors. Now, that is 100% me and how I acted in my career, right? I was terrified of what it meant to be a leader. The responsibility, right? What if I got things wrong? What if I didn't know enough? What if I was found out? I don't want to get
Mhm.
fired. All of these things kind of came up in my mind.
Exactly. And it's no surprise why Harvard Business Review just cited all those three
Yeah.
main considerations. You just talked about all of them. And I
Yeah.
hear a whole lot of fear right there.
Yeah, right. And all of which very much was fueled by, guess what? Imposter syndrome for
Dun,
me.
dun, dun, dun.
And meaning I shied away from leadership roles despite being encouraged to go for them. And in truth, I probably sabotaged my chances unconsciously, I might add, by engaging in behaviors that didn't really lend themselves to being a leader. So, what I'm talking
Mhm.
about here are things like partying too hard. I mean, I did work in advertising, so that was kind of part of the culture, but partying a little bit too hard, a bit of insubordination as well, defensiveness, because I was trying to hide the fact that I didn't think I knew a lot or I didn't have any confidence.
Mhm.
Not going the extra mile. I never put in the extra work because I was like, maybe similar to you, or maybe not to the girl, your lady you were talking about before. But I didn't work to live. I mean, I didn't live to work. I worked to live, kind of thing. So
Right.
I didn't really go the extra mile. And I was doing all of this despite having what I now know to be exceptional leadership qualities, right? So good
Mhm.
listening skills, problem solving skills, strategic thinking, high level networking and relationship building skills, all of these. It never occurred to me that these were all leadership skills, right? So that meant that I just really didn't see myself as a leader either. I didn't think I
Wow.
had.
And the funny thing is, it's almost sh a little shocking to hear you say that because I see a lot of that leadership capability in you. So it is a little like, wow, this is what this is the kind of her thought process or was her thought process.
Yeah, totally. And, I'm sure many of our listeners can relate to this. I mean, we have hopefully
Mhm.
a diverse and wide range of listeners here. But this leadership had this tag and label to it that I decided in my mind, wasn't possible or attainable for me. So I dismissed it, right? I did everything I could
Right.
to avoid it through my own lack of self-belief and confidence. And, the result is that this really stunted my career and my ability to earn more money. And, it just put me financially disadvantaged as well.
Exactly. That's why I'm glad you brought up this topic, and that's why we had to talk about it because for what you just said, there may be listeners who are in this position. They've avoided leadership roles and haven't really talked about it, and we need to because today's workforce needs a diverse group of leaders to take charge and guide organizations into the place they need to go in the future, and which we know is rapidly changing.
Mm,
I also wonder how culture plays a factor. So, of course, growing up as a South Asian female to as a daughter of, immigrants,
mm,
the advice that my parents would give me when it came to the workplace is to basically find a job where I can go in, get out, get the paycheck. Just look down and work hard was essentially all they told me about the workplace or the modern workplace. Not once did they encourage me to be more or go after a leadership role. They were just focused on getting me into a job that was stable. That was their whole goal in terms of my profession. Was
mm.
this a message that you also heard growing up at all?
Oh yeah, 100%, right.
Okay.
This message was very loud and clear. It
Okay,
was
good.
like, keep your head down, do your best, don't stand out. But I mean, this might come down to the overall message from my parents. That when I was growing up, they would often reiterate that I was a bit of an average learner and an average student, and so I think that was designed to protect me, like just do your best, keep your head down, don't cause any trouble, just in order for me to have a life where I could afford to pay for a house and all that kind of thing and whatever. But it actually
Sure.
really just restricted me from any sort of growth. So whilst it had the best intentions, it probably just
Right.
it did really help me overall. And that kind of lack of pushing myself or growing myself really included then pursuing any sort of leadership role because it was like, well, you're not smart enough to do that, so just keep your head down.
Interesting.
Mm,
Yeah, I think in a way it was a similar message because I was never encouraged to do it. My parents, their whole thing was just get me into a stable job and,
mm,
don't try to, like you said before, don't try and rock the boat. Just do
yeah,
what you're told because for
yeah,
them, stability was really important in terms of how they saw my life being lived out.
mm,
It was when I first started working in corporate America, I thought that should only be my goal, is just to look down and work hard. And it wasn't until I was a bit more experienced and saw how ineffective people were at leadership that it struck me. I really felt a calling to do something about that and to change the way leaders are developed. Hence, the work that I've committed in my professional life, my passion, today is towards leadership development. We need people who can lead the right way with a blend of compassion and empathy with the technical know-how and leadership capability. But if we don't have the right talent seeking out leadership roles, then we risk getting the wrong type of people for those positions. In
yeah.
fact, I read this recently that Deloitte had published a survey not too long ago and found 59% of professionals trust their senior leadership team. 59%. I mean,
I,
wow.
I think that's still quite high, to be honest.
I mean, it is quite it is maybe I'm just
Yeah.
boggled because when you think about all the work that folks like myself do in leadership development, I'm like, man, we're still chipping at the block there, right?
Yeah, true,
And even
true.
just myself, I'll be honest, I have questioned pursuing a leadership role for
Mm,
me. Is the juice worth the squeeze? And I
yeah.
say that for a few reasons. First, the higher you climb, the less truth you get. And I think leadership, there is a little bit of loneliness at that point.
Mm,
Second, your time also becomes extremely limited because you not only have your sort of whatever scope you're in charge of as an individual, you also have all of the people leadership responsibilities and dealing with all of the people and their drama and making sure they're hitting their goals so you hit your goals. So it's your time is really stretched. And then also third, the expectation that failure is an option. And you said this earlier yourself, you didn't want to fail, right? And
mm,
I think on top of all of that, you're always going to have that conflict will always be part of your job description. And this
yeah.
is just a few. So again, is it worth being in a very, I don't know, high ranking position or a leadership role?
Yeah, I mean, those are valid concerns about going into leadership for sure. I mean, I was never encouraged to go for leadership roles either, even at school. I mean, probably a couple of times in my career I was, and as I say, I didn't go for them because I didn't
Right.
believe in myself. But even at school, I shied away from it, mate. I mean, I was never the captain of a sports team or the schoolhouse I was in or any club. I mean, I was in the clubs and the teams, but I mean, I really only ever got to VC level. So I started, I started my leadership avoidance young.
You really did. I mean, I think we have that in common. I was never captain of anything growing up either. I could absolutely relate to you there.
Right, yeah. I mean, I don't think being a team captain is all it's cracked up to be anyway. I mean, I think it's just a bit of a popularity contest when you're at school, to be honest. But I do remember in one particular job, my manager called me her 2IC, right? And I actually looked behind me and I said, wait, are you talking about me? Okay, it took me a while to own that label. And at first, I was really uncomfortable about it, right? Like, what does that mean
Mhm.
now? Do I have to
Right.
start sucking up to people? Do I have to behave in a certain way? Does this
Oh.
mean I can't slack off from time to time or go to the pub? What does it all mean? I was super puzzled by it for a while. And, no one explained to me what I had to do as a result of having a label like that. And in fact, I think I may have even sabotaged myself even more. Although, to be fair, that place was probably one of the most supportive agencies I have worked at, and the leadership team there did actually make a really positive impact on me. So, some of the things that they said to me and encouraged me to do have really stayed with me, and I've taken through with me since.
Wow.
Mm.
Okay, I do have a quick question.
Mm.
2IC, what is that referring to
Second in
exactly?
charge,
Ah, okay. I saw
like
the
vice
label. I
captain.
heard the label and I was like, wait, 2IC, what am I missing here? Okay.
Yeah. Second in charge.
Thank you for the clarification.
That's okay.
I think, also similar to you, the thing for me, I also am going back to it as far as a consideration, and I shared this earlier of the idea that leadership gets lonely,
Mm,
and I love working with people too much. The energy, the collaboration, the authenticity when you're together, brainstorming, ideating
hmm.
and the honesty in that, I think that also gets diluted the higher up you go, up the corporate chain you go. Plus, just all the politics and the bureaucracy that comes with it. Again,
Yeah,
really, is
totally.
juice worth the squeeze here? You
Well, I
tell me.
totally agree with you there. And, that could be a genuine underlying and driving fear for a lot of people, and I come to think
Mhm.
of it, that was probably one of mine because I really wanted to fit in and belong so badly that perhaps the idea of being a leader scared me because it's going to detach me from people and the friendships that I had. And I really didn't
Right.
want that, and I also struggle with authority. So that could be a bit of an issue too.
Yeah, well, absolutely a driving fear for people. And let's also not forget the inequality in female representation of leadership roles. It's gotten better over, especially the last, I would say, 5 years, it's gotten better. But historically, and still we see today, there is, parity there is not exactly on the same level. In fact, I would say About 55% of Americans would say there are too few women in leadership roles. And, we all can agree that women lift up economies, so the female voice at the top is crucial. And I saw this also recently, a couple of years ago, from a survey that Career Builder put out. They found that only 34% of professionals wanted to move into a leadership position. And so I'm pretty sure everything we're talking about here is pretty much what they're all thinking when they were completing that survey.
Yeah.
Is the juice worth the squeeze? And that same survey found that men, African Americans, and those who are LGBTQIA plus were more likely to become leaders than women.
Oh.
So imagine that.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't think we're preaching to the choir here. I think it's quite universally known there's a bit of leadership avoidance going on, but is it being talked about in that context? But we do know very clearly that representation across the board is low. And I read some recent research the other day by Roberts Walters North in the UK that revealed that 52% of Gen Z professionals are intentionally avoiding management positions, right?
Wow.
And that
Hmm.
article also said that it's not that Gen Z doesn't respect leadership, it's that they associate management with stress, limited autonomy, and
Yeah.
poor work-life balance. All the things we've just been
Yeah.
talking about, right? So that's a really fascinating set of facts there because this
Mhm.
is going to affect the leadership pipeline. And we already haven't already have a problem with not enough women or diversity in the C-suite and leadership roles. So if the perception isn't good, then the pipeline's going to dry up. So leadership really does have a branding problem, right?
Exactly. And it's really sad because when you think about how the world is changing at such a rapid pace,
Mm,
this is the time that we need strong leaders in those roles to be able to drive the work and their organizations in a way that will keep up with that pace.
yeah.
So if we're not getting the right talent, the pipeline to fill all of that need, then we really are at a risk for what's to come in the face of the work that we're
Yeah.
doing. And
Well,
since we know that,
we'll have the wrong leaders in leadership.
yes, and then the cycle just keeps continuing. So it
Yeah.
never breaks,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
we'll be still talking about this 10 years from now, going, hey, Rachel, remember that conversation about leadership avoidance? Guess what? It's still ever present today.
Correct. Yeah.
And because imposter syndrome is at the undercurrent of all of this, it plays a huge role. People, perceive themselves just lacking the qualifications and the skills to be a leader. And
Mm,
that's why we need passionate people like us
yeah.
to encourage other talented people to pursue leadership. I always strive to show others that I believe in them and the talent they possess to be able to do those magical things.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned before, imposter syndrome was a big barrier to my own leadership pathway. It completely blocked it. So we absolutely do need to spot the signs of imposter syndrome in our teams, and help them to build their confidence so they can pursue leadership roles if that's right for them. Otherwise, we're all gonna miss out.
Absolutely. And you make a good point if it's right for them. Everyone
Mm,
has to, being in a leadership role, it's may not be for you, and that's okay. If it's something that you truly want to pursue because it's part of your career goals, or you have an aptitude for executive leadership and you want to be in that position to see major change and to make an impact, that's great. But it's also okay if it's not part of your life path or your life's goals. I
mm,
don't think there should be any kind of judgment for people who choose not to pursue that, right? There should be understanding there that these are all decisions that we all make. And my reason for wanting to pursue more leadership positions, maybe for the future, are stemming from a place of I want to make a bigger impact and I want to
mm,
be directly involved in the coaching and evolution of others. So this is a very personal decision, right? But
mm.
if the avoidance is because of something else, then it's a workplace problem.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to tackle.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we've talked a lot about what leadership avoidance is, how it shows up, but let's talk through a few ways that if you're listening and you want to really expand on this, here are some ways that you can encourage your talent to take on leadership roles. I think it's really important when you're leading through a team, and even if you're not, just to have a conversation with another person to understand their career goals and see if leadership aligns to that. So if you're asking a person about their career goals and they say, "Oh, I want to be in a management position," you
Mm,
have to ask the question, why? What is it about that position that they want to pursue or attain or do? There has to be a connection to their values. And if you notice that someone who potentially is in a minority group showing a tendency to avoid leadership, but you feel has a talent for it, I think that's an opportunity to really take that talent aside and dive a little deeper. So reach out to them when opportunities do come up and have a conversation to get their input. I would also publicly praise that person's leadership abilities, especially in front of other senior leaders, because that will give them the confidence to then go out and pursue something if it is connected to their career goals in that way. And of course, I think you have to give people a chance to be in a leadership role to test if it's for them. And I think, I see this a lot also when people are applying for jobs. How
yeah,
many times do we hear stories of someone applying for a job? Maybe they're a manager at a manager level and they're applying for a director level role. And the feedback they get for why they're not being given an offer is because you don't have the experience.
yeah.
Well, how will I
Hate
get the
that,
experience if you don't give me a job? You have to
right?
give people a chance. This is something that it really bothers me so
Oh, it
much.
does me too. Right?
Right, it boggles my mind.
You can't employ somebody who's got everything on the list. It makes no sense.
Exactly. Exactly. And you lose so much talent that way.
Yeah.
Lori Greiner, she's on that show, Shark Tank, and she said something once that really stood out to me. She
Mm,
said she's a firm believer that you hire based on character and
yeah.
you can train the skill. I
Yes.
mean, the
There's
connection is so real here.
there's a lot of talk about that actually at the moment. So maybe we should do an episode on that. Let's
Ooh, okay.
Yes, I like that one. No, totally true. Look, at the end of the day, leadership isn't for everyone, right? And that's okay too. Some people are totally comfortable not taking leadership roles or moving up the ladder, like the example you used at the start of this episode. And you don't need a title to be a leader, right? Leadership comes in many forms, and we have to start with how we lead ourselves, right? How do we show up? How do we
Mhm.
want to be seen and recognized and valued? Like what impact do we want to be making on others and the places and spaces that we are in? Because leadership is a mindset and something you embody, not a title you have or something you just know how to do, right? It's a skill. So if you do want to step into leadership at some point in your career, know that it starts with you and it starts now, because you will always be learning no matter what level you are at or the title that you hold, right? It's continuum. We are always a work in progress.
Very well said, Rachel. And I'm really happy that you teed it up that way and tied it up that way because you're right. Leadership is the mindset, it's the behavior that you embody. You don't have to be in a leadership position for someone to look at you and say, that's a leader. That's a
Mm.
leader that I would maybe want to strive to embody those characteristics. Wherever you are in your career journey, our hope is that you can take away these insights from this episode. Before you rule out a leadership role, use your values as a compass to understand how a role in leadership can fulfill you and meet your career goals. And if leadership isn't for you, that's okay. There
Mhm.
are other ways to have a fulfilling and meaningful career that doesn't involve a fancy title.
So true. And avoiding leadership could be a result of imposter syndrome. So really ask yourself, what is causing you to decide leadership isn't for you? And is that really true about you? Because you might
Hmm.
make a wonderful leader. And, if imposter syndrome is causing that to be a preventative in your career, you're missing out. You are missing out. Other people are missing out.
Exactly. Exactly. Think about what the workplace is risking by you not being in that leadership role or that quote unquote leadership position.
Yeah, that's right. And just remember, everybody loses when bright people play small.
There you go. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Leading Ladies Who Lunch podcast. If we can leave you with a thought, If you have avoided taking on a leadership role, how will you think about that differently now? If you like this episode, we would be so grateful if you can share it with your friends and tag us on social media at Leading Ladies Who Lunch. Your reviews of this podcast mean so much to us. We'd love it if you can rate it and subscribe to the show.
Remember, you can find us and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcast platforms. So subscribe to stay up to date with the latest episodes and follow us on Instagram at Leading Ladies Who Lunch.
Stay tuned for the great episode in 2 weeks.
Until then, stay sassy. Thank you for joining us on the empowering journey at the Leading Ladies Who Lunch podcast. We hope you've enjoyed our insightful discussions, actionable strategies, and inspiring stories that we break down during each episode. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to Leading Ladies Who Lunch on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And remember, the conversations you've heard on this podcast are just the beginning of your journey. Let your voice be heard, inspire change, and continue breaking barriers as you lead with authenticity, resilience, and unwavering determination.
Until next time, keep embracing your leadership potential, challenging the norms, and shaping a better world for women in the workplace. Leading Ladies Who Lunch, empowering women, changing lives.